Right. Okay. Let's make this worth your while. So the smartest ways to make money from property in 2026. Let me just cover the first bit again. So what I see time and time again, especially at the start of the year, is that somebody will say, you know what the perfect property strategy is in 2026? It's HMOs or it's commercial conversions. Or what you want to do in 2026 is you want a deal source. And people do that. And let's be honest, the majority of people that do that because they're selling a deal sourcing course or they're selling a HMO course or they're selling HMOs, right? So they do it to fit their agenda. One of the things that I've always loved about what we do here when we're talking about property and property investment is we teach our franchisees to do all of it. We teach them HMOs and commercial conversions and lease options and deal sourcing and flipping and refurbing. And we teach them how to do new build. We teach them all everything. And therefore we have no preference which one is going to be the one that you each one any one of our franchisees focuses on for the next 12 months. We have no, there's no agenda, there's no hidden agenda that you need to be aware of. And therefore, we approach this problem slightly differently. And we approach it from a much more thorough point of view because we take a lot more things into consideration, not just what have I got in my shop that I want to sell, which seems to be the motivation from a lot of people that give that kind of advice at the start of the year. So when you're creating your plan for the next year, the things that you might be taking into consideration will include things like, of course, you're going to look at the economy. What is happening with the economy? Where are interest rates? Where is inflation? Is this a good economy to invest in, or would you rather invest into another country? Would you rather invest into Spain or the USA or Dubai, which is where a lot of money seems to be going and has been for the last few years? You look at the economy and you think about the strength of the economy, and whether it's the right time to invest into that economy. As a snapshot of that, or as a smaller slice of that economy, you're also going to look at the property market. How is the property market performing? Is it on the up? Is it on the is it on the down? What do you think the growth is going to be in the area that you're going to invest in? And of course, not only do you need to look at the UK, the wider property market, but you also need to look at the local property market of the area that you're looking to invest in as well. As an aside to that, and as a smaller snapshot of the property market, so we're gradually chunking down, the next thing you need to look at is the rental market. Because what's your exit for that property? Are you going to be renting it out? Is the rental market in that area strong? Are you going to be flipping it? And should you be taking the rental market into consideration? As an aside from that, you need to look into the legislation. Now, legislation can make a huge difference, not just on, when Rachel Reeves comes out and tells us about the next tranche of taxes that the government want to introduce or increase, but also property legislation on a more granular local level. So, for example, you might have Article 4 areas that are coming into your town, and that restricts the number or restricts the ease that you can create HMOs. And if HMOs is your strategy, then that's going to affect you. So you can mitigate for that. I'll give you an example in Warrington, which is where Sourced HQ is. There is an Article 4 restriction which is going to stop the C3 to C4 creation of HMOs in Warrington, and that's coming in September 2026. So we've been reading up about that local legislation and making a plan to make sure that if we want to add more HMOs into that market, then we do it compliantly and before that Article 4 restriction is put into place. And also, you need to look at future proofing. So, in future proofing, I guess you're looking at like the way that you structure these deals as well, and whether you're going to put them into a trust, because really the purpose that you're building this portfolio is because of your legacy and because of your family, or whether you're going to be doing something else with them. So you need to do all of these things. And for those of you that don't play golf, this might seem a little bit of a weird analogy, but I once heard somebody say to Tiger Woods, arguably the greatest golfer of all time. They said to him, when you're looking at a putt, when you're on the green and you can see that the grass is moving around all over the place, what do you look at? Do you look at where you're going to hit the ball? Do you look at where the hole is? Or do you look at the undulations in the ground and do you sort of, come up with a spot where you can aim at, where you know that like the ball is going to flow in the right way after it's hit that spot? And his answer is exactly what you need to do with all of these points that I've just given to you. And his answer was, I look at everything. I look at everything because everything affects everything. And that's exactly what you need to do because the economy is going to affect the rental market. The economy is going to affect legislation. Future proofing is going to affect the way that you structure it and therefore the taxes that you're paying. So you need to look at all of these things. You can't take any of these things in isolation. And it's a big decision, right? And it should be a big decision because if you're going to be buying a property, you're going to be spending potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds. But then in return, you should be getting back hundreds of thousands of pounds. And that's what's the exciting thing about property. So what you're going to learn in this webinar, we're going to talk about trends and cycles. We're going to talk about understanding and planning and being patient. We're going to talk about real wealth creation, fast tracking, and we're going to be talking about removing risk. And also, I'm going to tell you about the structure of how you should look at what you want to get out of property and what the strategy is that you should focus on in 2026. So trends and cycles, the first one that I'm going to tell you about, I can't give you the full information on this because it's a big topic. But the first thing that I think everybody that invests in property should look at is the 18-year property cycle. Some of you might have heard of it before. If you just Google the 18-year property cycle, I absolutely think that there's two things that you should do if you're going to invest in property, right? One, you should look at the 18-year property cycle. Two, you should read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I think pretty much 99% of people that are invested in property have already read Rich Dad Poor Dad. But I'm not sure that everybody knows about the property cycle. Now, it's called an 18-year property cycle, but it's not absolutely set at being 18 years. There are fluctuations. There are, it lengthens, it shortens, it behaves in slightly different ways. But on average, it's an 18-year property cycle. And I think purely from a perspective of knowing that when things are getting bad, they're not always going to be bad. Or more importantly, when things are going well, they're not always going to go well. It helps you to have that sort of overview that what you're doing right now, you need to plan for when the situation is slightly different. When we're talking about understanding and planning for patience, that really plays into the trends and the cycles really plays into that, and understanding that what you're doing right now might not be the most money that you're going to make out of this property. But if you're right and you think that this investment is going to come into the local area and the value of homes is going to go up in this local area in the next 2 or 3 years, and now's the right time to buy it because you're still getting it at a discount, then that wealth creation that you're creating from that property, you just have to be patient to get to that point where you're going to create a huge amount of money. When it comes to real wealth creation in property, and the way that people scale their property portfolios and their businesses faster is by negotiating equity, buying at a discount. If you think, right, that you're going to get a 10% return from a HMO, let's just use this as an example, and this is purely off the top of my head. You're going to get a 10% return from a HMO, and that HMO is going to give you £1,000. That £1,000 that you create every single month is obviously a good thing, right? That's your cash flow, and that's a good thing that HMO is going to provide for you. But on day one, it's going to take you 60 months to make £60,000, right? So those 60 months are 5 years, right? Now you can fast track those 5 years by negotiating a £60,000 discount on that property. So if you're looking to scale your wealth creation and make your wealth creation as fast as possible, it doesn't matter which strategy we're going to talk about in the next part of the webinar. If you buy at a discount, you save yourself years and years and years of property ownership, because you bought at a discount, and the property market, if you're predicting the property market's going to go up, the property market will still go up. Whether you bought at a discount or not, the point that I'm trying to make is that the discount won't affect whether the property market goes up or not. But what you do is you fast tracked. If you buy that property at a £60,000 discount, you've just made the next 5 years unnecessary of just running a HMO for £1,000 a month. So you've put that £60,000 in your pocket on day one. And that is a massive, massive win. Don't ever forget that, because we're going to talk about property, we're going to talk about strategies, we're going to talk about returns, but real fast tracking wealth creation is done by buying at a discount and increasing the amount of equity that you have in properties. And we're going to discuss removing risk as well. And the way that we're going to look at removing risk is by understanding the decision that we're about to make on which strategy that we focus on and understanding the why of focusing on that strategy for the next 12 months. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn today. So this is me. My name's Chris. As you can see on that description there, nothing says that I'm really good at tech. So that's probably why we had the problems right at the beginning, and I couldn't get the screen to work properly. So what I do know, though, and this is good news for you, is I do know about property. I am the property director at Sourced. Sourced have been going for 8 years. I've been going at Sourced for just under 8 years. And before that, I was doing properties as well. I was doing property because I was running other businesses and I was making a decent amount of money, which just started piling up in the bank. And I started spending it on properties. I did properties and I thought, you know what, I'm making a decent amount of money from these properties. I should do this a bit more. And so I put myself into property full time. I made some changes to the way that I invested in property to make it more about cash flow, to replace the money that I was getting from the businesses that I was running. I sold those businesses that I was running, and I started to take that money and invest it into property. I've been involved in deals that have gone from £39,000 up to £150 million. I've executed pretty much every property strategy that you can think of, either myself personally or by mentoring and guiding other people to go through those property strategies. And now what I do is I help drive projects forward. I build the portfolio here at Sourced, and I help create training content and valuable information for the franchisees who are under our umbrella. And that's what I do. So let's have a look at 2026 and how we go about making the decision and how we go about guiding franchisees to make the decision as to what property strategy they should invest into. So we've looked at the economy. We've already discussed that that's a very important thing that we need to look at. We've looked at the property market, we've looked at rental market, and we've looked at legislation, and we agree that they are very important things that you need to take into consideration when you're deciding what your strategy is going to be for 2026. But there's one thing that we haven't talked about that is even more important. And you know what? I'm going to be quiet for a couple of minutes, maybe a minute, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me what that is. So what is even more important than those 4 things that are listed on the screen right there, when you're deciding what property strategy that you're going to focus on for the next year? Can anybody answer in the Q&A box? And I've got the Q&A box open on the screen right now, and I'm looking at answers that are coming through. I'll tell you when somebody gets the right one. So nothing so far, no correct answer so far in the Q&A box. Okay, good. Some good guesses. So I've got purchase price, I've got compliance. Anybody else want to hazard a guess? Time. And these are all good things, right? For the person that put time, and I'm not going to say names because we'll keep it discreet. Time and your budget, you 2 guys that have put that, you're on the right track. You are absolutely on the right track. What can I do in the time that I have? One's own interest, again, very important. Yeah, absolutely, that's important. Okay, we'll stop it there. Some of you are absolutely going in the right direction, so well done. The answer is, let me just clear these questions so that I can get on to the next bit. Sorry, bear with me a second. I told you I wasn't very good at tech. You are the most important thing when it comes to choosing the right property strategy. And for those guys that were on the Q&A there, and they said time, yeah, it's the time that you can put into it. And somebody else said money, yeah, it's the money that you can put into it. What you want to achieve, yes, absolutely. your goals and ambitions. And then the other person who said what your interest is. Absolutely. It's absolutely critical. And this is why we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but this is why when somebody says to you, you know what property strategy you should focus on next year, you should do HMOs. That's why with me, whenever I go to a networking event or whenever I talk to somebody who's involved in property and they tell me that sort of broad, generic, just really wide kind of answer, kind of solution, my answer is always the same. Yeah, but what's right for one person isn't right for another person. Because what if one person is absolutely obsessed with sales, right? They just want to get out there, they want to talk to people, they want to do sales. Well, if that person had to go on to and manage an 18-month new build project, they'd be tearing their hair out after the first week because it's not lively enough for them. It doesn't satisfy that need that they have inside them. And they'd probably screw it up. They'd probably screw up the new build project, no matter how profitable it was at the start, because it's not their passion. It's not what they're interested in. Similarly, if you've got somebody who's like a very patient project manager, they're probably not going to be good at sales. So the skill set that you have is really important to take into consideration, because if you're trying to cram different skills into the skill set that you have or don't have, it's just going to become a problem. And that's why when you're looking at people who are starting in property and they want to go straight to new build, but they've got no property experience, that's why you would create a plan for them to get them to the new build experience and get them managing new build projects. But you do it in a way that is building their skill set to get there and keeping them occupied and keeping them satisfied with what they're doing in line with their skill set. You are the most important thing when it comes to deciding your strategy for next year. So whoever put time in the Q&A box, congratulations. Time is very important and you do need to take it into consideration. Absolutely, you need to take money into consideration, because if you don't have any money right now, how on earth are you going to go and buy a commercial conversion project and get that moving forward? Because just to get it off the ground, you're going to need surveys, you're going to need a huge amount of time, and you're going to need money to get to the point of purchasing the property in the first place. Even if you're buying it and you're borrowing 100% of the purchase price, because you've been able to structure the funding in the right way, you're still going to need money for surveys and for information and for pre-purchasing costs and stamp duty, for example. We need to look at your goals and what you want your goals to be by the end of next year, where you want to be, how ambitious you are. And obviously that's relative to the amount of money that you have and the amount of time that you have. And of course, your experience needs to be taken into consideration. But have you noticed that I put experience and not property experience? Because if it was just property experience, then I think it would discount a lot of the good experience that you have. Can you manage projects? Can you manage people? Are you differently skilled in different sectors that you can bring across to the property industry? What transferable skills do you have? So you need to take all of those things into consideration. And when you've taken all those three things into consideration, what you'll find is you usually sit into one of three categories of property and property investing. And this is what you should be asking yourself. What kind of investor are you? At what stage are you in your property investing? Are you focused on just cash flow because you're trying to build a pot of money and make a pot of money that you can then use to invest into property? Are you interested in projects where you're managing the trades yourself? And these tend to be smaller projects, like flip projects on residential homes, that kind of thing, or HMO conversions. You're talking to the plumber, you're talking to the joiner, you're talking to the electrician. You're managing all those trades to come in at the right time, at the right times, and take that project forward. So you're like the project manager, but they tend to be smaller projects. Or are you managing projects with a main contractor, and these tend to be larger projects because that justifies the cost of employing a main contractor, because they will be more expensive. And those kind of projects are, big commercial conversions or big new build projects, that kind of thing. So what kind of investor are you? And that's not to say that you move from one to the other, because I know people who are executing cash flow strategies, for example, deal sourcing, and their targets have been to make £1 million in a year just from two people working together to make £1 million worth of deal sourcing fees in 12 months. Now, for most people, to make £1 million in a year is going to be sufficient. And obviously, I say that in a tongue-in-cheek way. But for them, if they're so good at doing that and focusing on that cash flow strategy, why would they move into projects that take longer to repay you? All right, they're going to repay in bigger chunks, but why would they move on to something else? I know people who manage projects that where they're managing the trades themselves, where they'll make 250, £300,000 from a year. And again, they have absolutely no need to go up to bigger projects just be for the ego of saying, yes, I built those 24 houses all together, or I built that field of 50 houses. That's not necessary. Why would they do that? They're making 350 grand. Leave them alone. So one of the things that you need to consider for the goals in the previous slide, let me just go back to prove that it was there. So in the goals, what is your income goal? What do you want to make? And how does that fit in with all that structure, the skill set that you have? Because if you can make that £100,000 a year from doing a less risky strategy, such as deal sourcing, that sounds like a sensible plan to me. So when you've considered all those things that are motivating you and motivating the direction that you go within property, and you've worked out what kind of investor you are you focused on cash flow? Does that suit you and your situation and your skill set? Or is it more project managing trades, flips kind of projects? And that suits you and that suits your skill set? Or is it projects with the main contractor? Once you've worked that out, what you can then do is then you can look at all of those situations that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. Then you look at the economy, then you look at the property market and the rental market and legislation. Because what you then do is you choose the strategy that is, let's say, focused on cash flow. You choose the strategy that is best going to work for you in 2026. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through those three categories of cash flow, projects where you're managing the trades, and projects where you've got a main contractor. And I'm going to tell you, for the majority of people, which one of those strategies is the better strategy to focus on for 2026. So just be mindful of the language that I'm using there. I'm not saying that this is the one that you should focus on, but for the majority of people, this is the one that will fit the best into 2026. So which strategies, first of all, would be included within cash flow? So in a cash flow strategy, you could be selling deals. So you find a deal, you know that it's going to be a flip project and it'll make a 20% return. But instead of you doing that deal yourself, you'll package it up and you'll sell it on to an investor for a fee of £4,000 or £5,000. And if you do 2, 3, or 4 of them a month, and we've had franchisees in our network that have done 16 to 20 of those in a month, you can be making a significant amount of money. And this is a very low risk because you're not actually buying any of these properties. So as a risk mitigation, this is a really good strategy to focus on. You could look at rent to rent HMO or rent to rent serviced accommodation because they don't take a huge amount of money to get into, but they create a great amount of cash flow. You usually get the money back that you've invested into those deals within 6 months or so. Or you could start a letting agency. That's in property, isn't it? So you could set up a letting agency and you could make money from letting out other people's properties. You could build your pot of money, and at the right time, you can then go and buy the right property to add to your letting agency. But on this one, you own it. So you're making that money as well as your letting agency making that money. So there's 3 ideas for cash flow strategies. And in honesty, the one that I think is going to work really well next year, it was a close run thing, to be perfectly honest, is between a rent-to-rent HMO business or starting your own letting agency. And actually, if you're starting a rent-to-rent HMO business, which I've done in the past, you are basically setting yourself up as the letting agent. Um, both of those strategies, very strong cash flow, very strong growth, and very strong income potential in 2026 because of a number of factors. When you start to look at the property market and you look at the economy and you look at the rental growth that we've had over the last couple of years that followed the value growth that the property market experienced for the years before that. Yeah, there are hoops to jump over, and yes, there's compliance, and yes, there's legislation. But the way that I see that is, if I do all of those things properly, what I can then do is then I can be protected by all that legislation because the barriers for entry for people that aren't prepared to go jump through those hoops is much higher. Now, actually, at Source, we have two franchises. We have one franchise which is specifically about property investment. We've got another one which is about starting letting agencies. So we can see the potential that's there in 2026. We can see that people are out there, and the landlords that are out there don't want to let their own properties because there's so much legislation involved in it. So if you become that agent that solves those problems for them, bang, you've won business. And you keep providing those solutions, you win more and more business. The more business you win, the more money you make, and then the quicker you can get to investing into property yourself. Now let's look at the projects where you're managing contractors yourself. So I've put equity in there because I wanted to remind you that this is the first one where you're actually going to be buying properties yourself. So if you want to scale your growth as fast as possible, you have to be patient and wait for the right deals. And that means that you're going to be looking for deals that have got a significant discount in them. Because if you get a deal with a significant discount, you've just fast-tracked your property investing by years and years and years. And if you keep doing that and you keep being patient, then your property investing will absolutely be off the charts. Imagine you want to buy one property and you're getting impatient because it's been a couple of months and you haven't bought anything yet, right? But in the example of the HMO that I gave you earlier, you're fast tracking yourself by 5 years. So even if you have to wait another 6 months for the right deal to come along, for you to purchase a property that's significantly discounted, you've just fast tracked your property by 5 years. So the net result of that is, yeah, you've waited another 6 months, but you've decreased your property invested by 5 years because you've got a significant discount. So the net result is 4.5 years worth of scaling that you've just negotiated on day one. It's absolutely worth your while doing. So some of the other strategies that are involved in projects where you're managing contractors, flips and refurbs. So that's buying a property that's in a bit of a state, doing it up, and then selling it for a higher price. HMO refurbs, and that would probably, for a HMO refurb, that you would probably be keeping that yourself. Lease options, and the winner for this one at the moment again is HMOs. And again, looking back at the economy, looking back at the property market, why is that in 2026? Well, what we're seeing, and we're still seeing, is that the property market is fairly stagnant. Sales are hard to come by. So if you buy a property, you might be able to get it at a discount because owners out there are very motivated to get rid of properties. But why are they motivated to get rid of properties? Because it's difficult to sell at the moment. So you have to take the whole of the cycle into consideration. Yes, it's easy to buy at a discount right now, but then it's difficult to sell it. And you might be sitting on it for longer than you expected. And you might have to discount it more than you expected in order to get rid of it. So what we're seeing is right now is much more appropriate for portfolio growth, because instead of selling the property, you would refinance it and you would keep it as part of your own portfolio. Now, to go alongside that, the rental market is strong, as we just talked about in the previous point. So if you're at this stage of property investing, buying HMOs, creating good cash flow from those HMOs, and hopefully buying them at a discount so that you get good equity on day one, and then renting them out and making that cash flow, that is a very strong strategy for you to focus on in 2026. And then finally, the third category out of the three, we're looking at projects where you have a main contractor, and that could be creating commercial property, commercial conversion, so taking a commercial property and making it into a residential property, or new build and developing. So start, brand new houses. The winner out of this one, again, unsurprisingly, is commercial conversions. So in a commercial conversion, what you tend to do is you find an office building, let's say, and you split it into flats. And then when you've got those flats tend to be much easier to rent out and they'll rent out at a higher return than if you were if you were building a field of new build houses. So it was pretty tight on this one between commercial conversions and new build, but just because of the return that flats get in opposition to the return that normal family homes get, especially new build homes get, that's why the winner for this one was commercial conversions. And again, the reason is you're going to refinance it and you're going to hold on to it and you're going to rent it out. And the great thing with flats at the moment is you can rent them out as normal buy-to-lets, or you can rent them out as serviced accommodation if you're in the right area. We have some serviced accommodation flats that we have in Warrington, and even in Warrington, which is not, I don't think, wouldn't be described as a holiday destination, being kind to it, we still get really strong rental returns from these flats in Warrington. So let's look at some success stories of people that have been through this process and been through this decision-making process with us. Now, this is Shahid. He has done a huge amount of deal sourcing. And actually, when I was talking about the person that was right for deal sourcing, this is him. He at one point while he was with us, he tried to go forward and purchase a property and do it as a project. And actually, it failed because it's just not his skill set. He's a great example of someone who's absolutely put on this planet to be busy every single day, calling people, speaking on the phone, making sales, introducing investors to the right investment properties for them, and then helping them through that process. He needs that activity. And when it all slowed down, when he was trying to buy a property from an estate agent, it failed because everything was moving too slow for him. He's a great example of this. And that's why he would secure 38 rent-to-rent serviced accommodation units in one negotiation. That's why he was doing deals of scale, because he was so efficient at turning those deals around and getting them in front of the right investors, selling those deals on. So his focus was cash flow. We then have Phil, who looked at refurbishment projects. So he was looking at normal family homes, and he was actually one of the trades that would go into these family homes and do the work as well as managing the other trades that were in there. And he would make around £40,000 per flip that he did. And his plan, his strategy was just to focus on this: rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. £40,000 worth of profit, a few months in the construction phase, and so he could overlap these projects through the year and do more than one at once. And that very quickly escalates the amount of money that you can make in a 12-month period. HMO conversions, again, looking at that second category, the one where we're managing the trades ourselves. This is Nigel, and he would manage the trades. This is the house behind him that he converted into a HMO. And then once he'd converted it into a HMO, he actually rented it out to the NHS on a FRI lease. And for those of you that don't know, that means a fully repairing and insuring lease. And then Nigel just held on to that property, didn't take any management. The NHS did it for him and paid him on HMO rates for the period of that contract. Commercial to residential conversion. So this is Chris. This was actually his first ever property deal. So he did this as a joint venture with somebody who was a lot more experienced. £875,000 purchase price. That is the building behind him, although it's a CGI render, but that is exactly what the building looks like. And he converted that office into flats. And those flats, because he was in Brighton, those flats were specifically targeted toward the serviced accommodation market. And those flats absolutely flew off the shelves. And they're very, very popular because they're really close to the seafront in Brighton. And then this one was a new build. Well, it's a kind of new build. It was an old property, but only one wall of the property was left standing. The rest of it was knocked down. And again, the CGI render behind, that is exactly what was built in that area. Now that one was one property that was built, knocked down to make two. The next project that Jamie did was a six new build project, and then he moved on to a 22 new build project. And again, that's because his skill set matched what was going on there. His skill set and his experience were exactly right to scale up in the new build project space. He would have struggled to do sales, I'm sure, in a way that Shahid never did. This is all about selecting the right strategy for them in the right location at the right time. Now, if you wanted to become part of Sourced, I've mentioned franchisees a couple of times now. If you wanted to start a property investment journey, and again, those projects on the right hand side, the picture on the right hand side is one of the buildings that we've built, or one of our franchisees has built. You'd probably need about £50,000 in your pocket to get this business off the ground. And then when you look at all the things that you need, property leads, investor leads, systems, you need marketing. You might have a mentor that you talk to about the projects to analyze and assess your deals. You need to pay fees for funding applications. You need to go to training events to keep teaching yourself about all of this information. You'll need to go to networking, and you need to pay solicitors for documents and contracts. It's probably going to cost you about £5,000 a month if you're active and you're doing it full time. Whereas at Sourced, all of those things come under the package that we give to all of our franchisees. So if you want training, if you follow the column down the left-hand side, I think you can see my mouse here. So if you follow this column going down the left-hand side, if you want training, you'd go to a trainer. If you want support, you'd probably go to a trainer or you'd go to a mentor. If you want unlimited support, you'd go to a mentor for sure. If you wanted investor leads or property leads, you'd go to a lead generation company. If you wanted an app to sell properties from, you'd probably go to an estate agent. But an estate agent would cost you 1%. And leads would cost you £50 per lead. And a mentor might cost you £500 a month. And a trainer might cost you 25 grand a year. If you wanted to go to funding, if you wanted funding, you'd go to a lender, but you'd probably get a low loan to value, which means that you need more money in your own pocket. And so on and so on. At Sourced, all of these things, training, support, even unlimited support, leads, property leads and investor leads, act to sell your deals, funding from our brokers, agreements and principles from the brokers, and joint ventures. We do all of that at Sourced. And the price to join us is £10,000 plus VAT and £245 per month. And that's for a 5-year term. So we make this all very, very accessible. And as you can hear, the depth that we have and the thoroughness in our decision making and our guidance is something that is very, very difficult to find from anywhere else. Now, these are the different brands that we have, and this is how we can offer all of those things to you in that one package at a low price. Because we've got the living partner is our letting agency franchise. The property partner is our investment franchise. We have financial services to help you find the right lending for your deals. We have enterprise, which is a way to reduce the amount of money that it costs for you to take care of your tax liabilities. So your tax costs that you have every year in running a business. And we have deal search, which is all the franchisees working together to find the right deals, which they can swap and trade between each other. This is what our website looks like, source.co. So head over there if you want to see any of those brands. We also have a podcast, which if you haven't had enough of listening to me today already, I actually host a podcast. We have them going out roughly once a month. So if you want to learn more about property and you're sitting in the car quite a lot, it's the perfect time to listen. Go to the Behind the Bricks podcast. We're on Spotify and SoundCloud and Apple. We're all over the place. We even put them on YouTube because we record them on video as well. So if you want to see the Behind the Bricks podcast, you can go to YouTube.